I want to understand the internal process at Helios. So let's imagine I'm an analyst and I come and tell you, let's say I'm a BFSI analyst, I say there's XYZ bank, I think we should buy it for these reasons. And whatever, you first reject and then select and this is my valuation, it's at 100, I think it's worth 200 and so on. From that stage, how do you and everybody else involved with Helios, how do you decide whether or not to actually put your money into the stock?
So I'm assuming that you're our own analyst.
Right? Yeah,
so,
of course.
So when you come to us and you tell us that, okay, I've come up with this stock, I again am assuming that you cleared the 8 factors of rejection, right? So once that happens, there's a committee which sits, which consists of all the top guys. And obviously, if the manager feels that he can't wait for the committee meets practically every week. There's no hard and fast rule. You can just call for a committee meeting, which is an internal committee. So if the manager still believes that he doesn't have time, then he may take a small exposure to that stock before calling the committee. By the way, even before he does that, the stock has to be covered by the analyst in a proper format. There's a format in which he has to present to the manager in the first place. And then the manager may call for a meet, or he may just take a view that, okay, I'll buy it now and probably I'll wait for the next meet to call them in. But that, obviously the position that he'll take will be a very regular kind of position. It won't be an overweight position as such, and depending on the market cap, obviously that's how it'll work. And then the committee sits, we really thrash it out. I mean, the committee consists of people who have got 30-year plus experience in the industry. So you can imagine the kind of discussions that happen during that time. And one more thing I want to tell you, that even before the analyst comes to the manager, the analyst will go through our head of research, who has to vet the idea and tell him that, okay, this is fine, you can go and pitch now. And our head of research is, again, 30 years of experience in equity research. So you can imagine if something comes from him, you can be rest assured that he's done his homework pretty well. So, and obviously the positioning is also such that if it's, beyond a large cap, right? If it's not a large cap, then probably it starts at 1.5 odd percent or 2 odd percent kind of position, and then slowly, gradually builds up as and when the manager gets comfort in the fundamentals and the workings of the firm of that particular company. So the position gets built up, and obviously price appreciation happens. So be it.
And how do you deal with differing opinions at the investment committee level? Now, it's on, like, you may argue on whether you should buy the stock, you may argue on valuation, or all sorts of things. So how is it, does it come down to a vote, or is it a question of convincing others? How does that work?
No, it's more or less consensus. There's nothing like a vote in this. Everybody has to be on board for this. So it has to be a consensus call, but mostly the rejection happens not because, as I said, that everything looks fine, right? It's mostly the call on whether this particular trend or theme that you're coming up with, or some stock from a particular industry, is that industry looking good or no? Right? I think ultimately that comes down to that, rather than on valuation, because you're already clear that you're taking it because of this value, and that's why you're there discussing it. So I think the major discussion is on the industry and whether it's got a long runway for growth or no, because we believe in at least an industry to have these tailwinds, which not only carries the stock along the way in terms of growth in earnings, but also re-rate. We want the stock to re-rate along the way, because that's where the real multiplication of return comes from, right? Unless the re-rating doesn't happen, then you just keep growing along with the earnings. But once the re-rating happens, that's when you see a step-up jump in your... So that's what we try to analyze and take a call on.
In your experience, what do you think distinguishes the good analysts from the great analysts?
There's nothing like good and great. By the way, let me tell you, we always say that when we come up with this set of stocks, we will not tear our hair apart to understand that, okay, within this industry, I've got 4 stocks, which is the best one? No. We will go with whatever is there on with us on the valuation front and all. But I think the great, not the better analyst, let me put it that way. There's nothing like great or good. But I would say what sets apart an analyst from the regular crowd is to understand whether there is a long-term story playing out or not in this. You may get carried away, like every other analyst can make a worksheet, right? But the fact is, how do you interpret that worksheet? How do you interpret the balance sheet? That is, I think, more important. So we, in fact, insist with our analysts that first you don't look at the P&L. You look at the balance sheet. you take a call on the balance sheet, you see whether how clean the balance sheet is, and if you can if you can make sense of the balance sheet, your P&L numbers will just flow from there. So you have to connect the numbers have to speak to you. Literally, they speak to you if you go through enough. So that's why I hate these computers. When you see the balance sheet in a digital format, you can't shuffle pages. So that's what the problem is. So our analysts are told to take printouts and look at it that way.
Right.
So that's how it works for us. So I think that's what sets a better analyst apart from the rest of the crowd.